It is a story older than history, a myth that has haunted our dreams and fueled our ambitions. It begins not with a king or a conqueror, but with a rebel. A titan named Prometheus, who saw humanity shivering in the twilight of ignorance and dared to defy the gods. He ascended to the heavens and stole the sacred fire, a gift of knowledge, warmth, and progress. But every gift from the gods comes with a price. This single act of defiance ignited the spark of civilization, but it also unleashed a terrible vengeance from Olympus. For the fire that gave us light also cast the long shadow of consequence. It was the gift that made us who we are, and the curse that sealed our fate. This is the story of the stolen flame and the eternal paradox of being human, blessed with divine knowledge and forever bound by its terrible cost. Before time had a name, before the world we know took shape, there was chaos. From this swirling void emerged the first divinities, Uranus, the starry sky, and Gaia, the deep-breasted earth. Their children were the Titans, 12 colossal beings of raw, elemental power who became the first rulers of the cosmos. Their reign was absolute, a period later poets would call the Golden Age, a time of effortless abundance. But this paradise was built upon a foundation of fear. Their leader was Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of the Titans. He had risen to power by challenging his own father, Uranus, and in his victory, he inherited a chilling prophecy, that he too would be overthrown by one of his own children. This prophecy became an obsession, a poison that seeped into the heart of his rule. To defy fate, Cronus committed an unspeakable act, consuming each of his divine children as they were born. His throne was secure, but his kingdom was one of stagnant perfection, devoid of change or challenge. Yet, not all Titans were defined by this brutal struggle for dominance. Among them were the sons of Iapetus, Prometheus, the forethinker, and his brother, Epimetheus, the afterthinker. Prometheus was different. He possessed an intellect that saw beyond the present moment, a mind that weighed cause and effect with uncanny precision. He watched the paranoid reign of Cronus not with blind loyalty, but with a calculating eye. He understood that a throne built on such dread could not stand forever. He and his brother chose a path of neutrality, standing apart from the internal conflicts of their kin. They knew a change was coming. Far from the halls of power, Cronus's wife, Rhea, had finally managed to save one child. Hidden away on the island of Crete, the infant Zeus grew strong, nurtured in secret, destined to fulfill the prophecy that so haunted his father. The air grew thick with anticipation. The golden age of the Titans was drawing to a close, not with a gentle fade, but with the impending thunder of a celestial war. The Titanomachy was on the horizon, a conflict that would tear the cosmos apart and forge a new order. And as the first rumbles of this divine revolution began, Prometheus watched, his mind already calculating the role he would play in the world to come. The Great War was over. The heavens had been fractured by the clash of gods and titans, but from the cosmic dust, a new power had emerged victorious. Zeus, son of Cronus, now sat upon the throne of Mount Olympus, his thunderbolt a symbol of his undisputed authority. The old order was swept away, and a new age had dawned. Yet, the world below was a silent and empty stage. The earth was beautiful, but barren of worshippers, its vast landscapes devoid of any creature that could appreciate the grandeur of the new Olympian gods. To remedy this, Zeus delegated the task of populating the world to the two Titan brothers who had wisely sided with him in the war, Prometheus and Epimetheus. True to his name, Epimetheus, the afterthinker, rushed into the task with reckless enthusiasm. He fashioned the animals, and to each he gave a wondrous gift from a divine cache. To the lion he gave courage and sharp claws. To the bird he gave the miracle of flight. To the deer, he gave speed, and to the bear, a thick coat of fur for warmth. He worked tirelessly, distributing every gift of strength, speed, and natural defense until the sacks were empty. Only then did he realize his critical oversight. He had left nothing for the final, most complex creation, mankind. It was then that Prometheus, the forethinker, stepped in to salvage his brother's blunder. He saw the formless clay left over and was inspired by a vision of nobility. He traveled to Prometheus in Greece, and, mixing the earth with holy water, he began to sculpt. He did not fashion a beast that walked on all fours, but a creature that stood upright, its form a reflection of the gods themselves. He shaped them with care and precision, but his work was incomplete. They were perfect statues, but they were lifeless. The goddess Athena, patron of wisdom, saw the beauty in his creation and breathed into the clay figures, giving them spirit and life. Thus, the first humans were born, but they were fragile, naked, and utterly helpless. Lacking the gifts Prometheus had squandered, they had no claws, no fur, no wings. They shivered in caves, unable to face the elements or the predators of the wild. Prometheus looked upon them not with divine detachment, but with a creator's love and a father's pity. He saw their immense potential, a spark of intelligence that mirrored his own, but he also saw their profound vulnerability. He knew that to truly live, to build, to dream, they would need more than he had given them. They would need a tool, a weapon, a source of comfort. They would need a spark of the divine itself. The time came to establish the permanent order between gods and mortals. At the ancient site of Mykone, a great meeting was convened. Zeus and the Olympian pantheon assembled to preside over a ceremony that would forever decide how sacrifices were to be divided. This single event would define the relationship between humanity and its creators, setting the precedent for all ages to come. On one side stood the mighty gods, eternal and all-powerful. On the other stood the frail fledgling race of men, looking to their champion, Prometheus, to be their advocate. Zeus, ever keen to reinforce his supremacy, saw this as an opportunity to put humanity in its place. He commanded that a great ox be brought forth and divided into 2 portions. Whichever portion Zeus chose would belong to the gods in all future sacrifices. The other would be left for mortals. The fate of humanity's sustenance rested on this division. Prometheus, understanding the gravity of the moment, accepted the challenge. His mind, always seeing several steps ahead, devised a plan, a clever deception born not of malice, but of love for his creation. He butchered the ox and meticulously prepared 2 offerings. In the first pile, he placed the finest, most succulent cuts of meat. But he concealed this prize beneath the least appealing part of the animal, the wrinkled, unappetizing stomach. For the second offering, he gathered all the bones, stripping them of any value. He then artfully arranged them and hid the entire pile under a thick, glistening layer of rich, white fat, an irresistible sight. He presented the 2 bundles to the king of the gods. "Father Zeus," he declared, "choose the portion that your heart desires." Accounts differ on what happened next. Some say Zeus, blinded by the tempting appearance of the fat, was genuinely fooled. Others claim the all-knowing God saw through the ruse immediately, but chose the bones anyway, seizing the perfect pretext to enact a punishment he already intended. Regardless, he reached out his divine hand and selected the pile of bones concealed by fat. The trick was revealed. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, followed by the rising fury of the Olympian king. This was more than a simple trick. It was a public challenge to his authority and wisdom. A mere titan had dared to outwit the ruler of the cosmos for the benefit of mortals. Zeus's rage was not fiery and explosive, but cold and absolute. He did not strike Prometheus down. Instead, he turned his wrath upon those Prometheus sought to protect. As a consequence for this defiance, Zeus made a terrible decree. Humanity would be denied the one tool essential for its advancement. He withdrew fire from the earth, leaving mankind with their meat, but no means to cook it. The victory at Mycenae was hollow. Prometheus had won a better meal for humanity, but in doing so, he had invited a far greater hardship upon them and declared a silent war on heaven itself. The retribution for Prometheus's trick at Mycenae was as swift as it was devastating. Zeus did not need a thunderbolt to punish mankind. He needed only to take something away. As his decree echoed from Olympus, a profound change swept across the mortal world. Every hearth, every campfire, every last ember that had provided warmth and security was instantly extinguished. For the first time, humanity faced the world without the blessing of fire. The earth became a place of relentless cold and encroaching shadows. The sun provided warmth by day, but its departure at dusk signaled the beginning of a nightly trial. The nights were terrifyingly long and filled with peril. The reassuring glow of a torch was gone, leaving people defenseless against the nocturnal predators that prowled the edges of their settlements. The sounds of the wild, once kept at a distance by a ring of light, now seemed to be right outside their cave dwellings. The loss was more than a matter of comfort. It was a blow to the very foundation of civilization. Without fire, food could not be cooked. Meat was tough and carried sickness. Grains could not be made into bread. This dietary hardship weakened their bodies and shortened their already precarious lives. The arts of craftsmanship stalled. Metal ores remained locked within stone, as there was no heat to forge them into tools or weapons. Clay could not be fired into durable pottery, leaving them with fragile vessels that could barely hold water or grain. The spark of ingenuity that Prometheus had so admired in his creation began to flicker and fade. Humanity was regressing. They huddled together in the damp chill of their caves, their lives reduced to a grim cycle of survival. There were no stories told around a crackling fire, no communal gatherings to forge social bonds, no light by which to create art on cave walls. There was only the gnawing cold and the ever-present gloom. From his solitary vantage point, Prometheus watched the consequences of his actions unfold. His heart was filled with a profound sense of responsibility and sorrow. He had meant to elevate mankind, to give them a standing worthy of their form. Instead, his defiance had plunged them into an existence more wretched than before. The laughter and feasting of the gods on their warm, well-lit mountain peak served as a constant, cruel reminder of what his creation had lost. This suffering could not be endured. The sight of his children, perishing in the cold he had inadvertently caused, solidified his resolve. A trick would not suffice this time. A direct, audacious act of rebellion was the only path forward. His gaze turned to Olympus, not with a scheme for deception, but with a plan for a divine heist. The decision was made. Prometheus, the forethinker, would not allow his creation to wither and fade in the cold. He knew the path would be perilous, and the punishment for discovery would be beyond imagination, but the alternative, the extinction of humanity, was unacceptable. He began his ascent of Mount Olympus, a feat no mortal could ever attempt. This was no ordinary mountain of rock and ice. It was the very home of the gods, a place that existed both in the world and beyond it, protected by divine power and watchful guardians. Prometheus, being a Titan, knew the secret ways. He moved with a stealth born of ancient knowledge, avoiding the keen eyes of Zeus's eagles that patrolled the skies and slipping past the nature spirits that guarded the slopes. His journey was a silent, determined climb into the heart of his enemy's power. Some legends suggest he was not entirely alone, that he had a sympathetic ally among the Olympians. Perhaps it was Athena who had helped him give life to man, or Hephaestus, the master craftsman, who understood the value of the flame better than any other. A shared glance, a deliberately unguarded passage, all he needed was a moment's opportunity. He finally reached the summit, the celestial realm of bronze palaces and eternal light. He made his way to the workshop of Hephaestus, the divine forge where Zeus's thunderbolts were made and the wonders of the gods were crafted. The air pulsed with heat, and the rhythmic clang of the smith god's hammer echoed through the halls. In the center of the forge burned the sacred fire, the primordial flame from which all other fires on earth had originated. It was pure, undying, and fiercely protected. Prometheus had come prepared. He carried a giant, hollow stalk of fennel. The plant's dry exterior would not burn, but its pithy core could hold a smoldering coal for hours, making it the perfect vessel for his theft. With his heart pounding, he waited for the opportune moment when the forge was unattended. Then, he lunged forward, thrust the stalk into the heart of the divine flame, and caught a single, priceless ember. He drew back the stalk, concealing the stolen spark within its hollow chamber, and immediately began his treacherous descent. Every step away from the forge was a gamble. He was carrying a secret that could reshape the world. This ember was more than warmth. It was knowledge, art, technology, and the seed of civilization itself. He finally reached the mortal realm as twilight fell. He found a group of humans huddled together, their faces pale in the gloom. He broke open the fennel stalk and revealed the glowing coal within. As he used it to light a pile of dry wood, the first earthly fire in an age sprang to life. A wave of warmth spread through the small group, and faces filled with fear were suddenly illuminated with awe and hope. But far above, on his Olympian throne, Zeus noticed something new. A faint scent of smoke was rising from the darkened earth below. The theft had been discovered. Prometheus had delivered his gift, but the full fury of a scorned god was about to be unleashed upon him. On the frigid, windswept plains of early Earth, humanity was a fragile species. Small, weak, and shivering in the perpetual twilight of their own ignorance, they were creatures of instinct, not intellect. They huddled in caves, prey to fearsome beasts and the biting cold of the night. It was this pitiable state that moved the heart of the Titan, Prometheus. He, who had molded them from clay, could not bear to see his creation suffer while the gods on Olympus reveled in warmth and light. He saw in them a potential that Zeus, in his high-handed wisdom, chose to suppress. A defiant compassion took root in Prometheus's soul, a decision that would forever alter the destiny of gods and mortals. His plan was as simple as it was audacious. He would steal fire. Not the destructive fire of a thunderbolt, but the creative, civilizing fire of the hearth, a power Zeus had expressly forbidden them. Under the cloak of secrecy, Prometheus ascended to the celestial realm. He walked among the gods, his purpose hidden behind a calm exterior. He approached the great hearth of Olympus, or, in some tellings, the very chariot of the sun itself. There, he took a giant, hollow stalk of fennel, a plant that dries on the outside but contains a flammable pith within. He touched its tip to the eternal flame, capturing a single, glowing ember. This tiny spark, nestled within the stalk, held the future of the world. The descent was perilous. Every shadow seemed to hold the watchful eyes of Zeus's servants. But he returned to the mortal realm undetected, a divine thief in the night. He found the shivering humans in their caves and presented his gift. At first, they recoiled from the dancing, living light. But Prometheus was a patient teacher. He showed them how to feed the flame with dry wood, how to feel its warmth, how to use its light to banish the darkness. For the first time, humanity was safe through the night. The roars of predators were now kept at a distance by a protective circle of light. Soon, they learned to cook their food, making it easier to digest and unlocking new sources of nourishment. The spark gave birth to craft. Clay was hardened into pottery. Ores were melted from rock, forging the first tools and weapons. The stolen ember was not merely fire, it was the dawn of technology, of community, of art, and of reason. It was the spark that ignited the human mind. While humanity celebrated its newfound power, a tendril of smoke from their first sacrifices of cooked meat drifted upwards, carrying the scent of defiance all the way to the throne of Olympus. The scent of roasted meat, a privilege once reserved for the gods, reached the nostrils of Zeus. It was the smell of transgression, the aroma of a broken law. His fury was not merely anger, it was a tectonic shift in the cosmic order. This was not about a stolen flame. It was about a challenge to his absolute authority. Prometheus, a mere titan, had dared to elevate mortals, to give them a tool of the gods, upsetting the delicate balance of power Zeus had fought so hard to establish. The universe had rules, and the first among them was obedience to its king. This act of compassionate rebellion could not go unpunished. Zeus's rage was cold and methodical. He would make an example of Prometheus, a lesson etched into the fabric of eternity for any who might contemplate a similar defiance. He summoned Hephaestus, the master smith of the gods, whose forges burned with the heat of volcanoes. The command was absolute: forge a bond that could not be broken by god or titan. Hephaestus, who held a certain sympathy for Prometheus, complied with a heavy heart, crafting shackles of a celestial metal, adamantine, that were stronger than any earthly material. Two of Zeus's loyal enforcers, Kratos and Bia, personifications of power and force, were tasked with seizing the Titan. They showed no hesitation, no remorse. They were instruments of the king's will. They dragged Prometheus to the furthest edge of the world, to the desolate, storm-lashed peaks of the Caucasus Mountains. There, they fulfilled their grim duty. He was bound to the unyielding rock face, exposed to the blistering sun and the freezing winds. The sentence was not for a lifetime, it was for all time. To compound the torment, Zeus sent a monstrous eagle, a fearsome agent of his authority, to be a constant reminder of his unending displeasure. The punishment was a spectacle of power, a permanent monument to the price of disobedience. Yet, as he was bound to the mountain, Prometheus did not beg for mercy. His spirit remained unbroken. He had foreseen the consequences of his actions and accepted them. He had given humanity a future, and for that, he would endure. But Zeus was not finished. He had punished the giver of the gift. Now, his vengeful gaze turned towards those who had received it. Zeus understood that a direct assault on humanity would lack the poetic justice his wounded pride demanded. Punishing them with thunderbolts would be too simple, too clean. The punishment had to match the crime. Prometheus had given them a gift that brought progress and enlightenment. Zeus, in turn, would bestow upon them a gift that appeared beautiful, but would bring about their ruin. His vengeance would be delivered not by a monster, but by a masterpiece. He conceived of a new creation, something the world had never seen, a mortal woman. Her name would be Pandora, meaning the all-gifted. He once again summoned Hephaestus, the divine artisan. This time, the task was not to forge chains of metal, but to sculpt a form from earth and water. Hephaestus molded the clay with unparalleled skill, crafting a figure of such perfect proportion and grace that she rivaled the goddesses themselves. But she was an empty vessel, a beautiful statue. It was the other Olympians who would breathe life and character into her. Each was commanded by Zeus to bestow a quality upon the creation, weaving a tapestry of irresistible charm and hidden danger. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, dressed her in shimmering silver robes and taught her the fine arts of weaving and needlework. The radiant Aphrodite poured grace upon her and endowed her with the potent power of desire. The Graces and Persuasion adorned her with golden necklaces. Finally, it was the turn of Hermes, the messenger god, the trickster. At Zeus's specific instruction, Hermes gifted her with a clever tongue, the ability to tell beguiling stories, and, most critically, a restless and insatiable curiosity. In her mind, he placed cunning and deceit. She was now complete, a being of breathtaking beauty, divine grace, and manufactured innocence, all concealing a nature designed to execute a subtle and devastating plan. Pandora was not evil in her own right. She was a perfect, unwitting instrument of divine retribution. She was a living, breathing work of art, created for the sole purpose of introducing a new kind of trouble into the world of men. With his creation ready, Zeus instructed Hermes to lead her down from Olympus, a deceptive offering for the brother of the man who had wronged him. The intended recipient of Zeus's calamitous gift was Prometheus, the brother of Prometheus. The two titans were polar opposites. Where Prometheus was the forethinker, cautious and able to see the consequences of actions, Prometheus was the afterthinker, impulsive and prone to acting without considering the outcome. Before his capture, Prometheus had given his brother one solemn, desperate warning: never, under any circumstances, accept a gift from Zeus. It was a warning born of profound insight into the Olympian king's vengeful nature. But such warnings are easily forgotten in the face of overwhelming temptation. One day, the god Hermes appeared at Prometheus's dwelling, not with a threat, but with Pandora at his side. Prometheus was utterly captivated. Her divine beauty and graceful presence were unlike anything he had ever seen. In that moment of enchantment, his brother's grave warning faded from his mind like a distant echo. He saw not a potential trap from a wrathful god, but a companion of unparalleled charm. He welcomed her with open arms, accepting Zeus's offering without a second thought. As if Pandora herself were not enough of a gift, the gods also sent a wedding present. It was a large ornate storage jar, a pythos, crafted from heavy clay and decorated with intricate designs. It was sealed with a heavy lid and came with a single, tantalizing instruction: it was never to be opened. For a time, life was idyllic. Humanity, still living in an age of ease, now had the company of the first woman. There was no hardship, no illness, and no strife. But the jar sat in a corner of their home, a silent and potent presence. It was a constant source of mystery. What could be inside? Was it a great treasure? Divine secrets? The curiosity that Hermes had so carefully planted in Pandora's mind began to grow. The instruction not to open it was not a deterrent, but a challenge. Every day, her gaze would fall upon the sealed vessel, and the desire to know its contents would become stronger. The forbidden nature of the jar became an obsession, a siren call to her inquisitive spirit. The perfect gift was about to reveal its true purpose. The moment of destiny arrived not with a thunderclap, but with the quiet scrape of pottery. Unable to resist the divine curiosity woven into her very being, Pandora approached the forbidden jar. Her hands, guided by an impulse she could not control, lifted the heavy lid. What emerged was not gold or divine nectar, but something intangible and horrifying. A dark, weightless swarm of spirits burst forth, a torrent of all the miseries and sorrows that the gods had kept locked away from the world. They were the abstract architects of human suffering: sickness, with its power to weaken the body; strife, which sets brother against brother; bitter jealousy, which poisons the heart; endless toil, which burdens the back; and 1,000 other pains and hardships that had been utterly alien to humanity until that instant. These malevolent spirits scattered on the winds, spreading across the earth with invisible speed. They entered the homes and hearts of mortals, and the golden age of humanity came to an abrupt and catastrophic end. Laughter was replaced with anxiety, peace with conflict, and ease with grueling labor. The world, once a paradise, was now a place of trial and adversity. Pandora, seeing the terrible consequences of her action, was overcome with horror. In a panic, she slammed the lid back onto the jar, but it was far too late. The evils were already loose, irrevocably changing the human condition. Her act had unleashed a permanent state of struggle upon the world. Yet, in her haste, she trapped one last spirit inside. Fluttering weakly at the bottom of the now empty vessel was a single, gentle entity, Olympus, the spirit of hope. The meaning of this final act has been debated for centuries. Was this Zeus's ultimate cruelty, to give humanity endless suffering, but withhold the one thing that could make it bearable? Or was it an unforeseen mercy, a flaw in the perfect punishment, preserving hope so that it could remain a constant companion to humanity in their darkest hours? With fire, humanity gained the power to build and create. With the contents of the jar, they inherited a world of pain and conflict. They were now complex beings, capable of great innovation and great suffering. The gift of Prometheus had been answered by the gift of Zeus, and the epic story of the human struggle, armed with both ingenuity and hope, had truly begun. The verdict from Olympus was not merely a sentence, it was a declaration. Zeus, his authority challenged and his new order threatened, would make an example of Prometheus that would echo through eternity. The king of the gods decreed a punishment that was not swift but eternal, designed to break the will of an immortal. For this task, he summoned his own son, Hephaestus, the divine craftsman, along with two of his most fearsome enforcers, Kratos, the personification of raw power, and Bia, the embodiment of brute force. Their destination was the edge of the known world, the desolate storm-lashed peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, a place where the sky met the earth in a formidable wall of rock and ice. The journey itself was a somber procession. Kratos and Bia were relentless, their purpose clear and unyielding as they dragged the captive Titan across continents. But Hephaestus was conflicted. He was a creator, not a warden. He respected Prometheus, another master of craft and invention. He understood the Titan's compassion for the fledgling human race. To chain a kinsman, a fellow divine being, to a rock for an act of empathy felt like a perversion of his own art. His protests, however, were futile. Kratos mocked his sentimentality, reminding him that the will of Zeus was absolute. Pity was a weakness the new regime could not afford. Upon reaching the chosen precipice, a sheer cliff face exposed to the harshest elements, the grim work began. Hephaestus, his heart heavy, brought forth his tools and the adamantine chains he had been commanded to forge. Each strike of his hammer was a painful note in a symphony of obedience. He fashioned shackles that no force, mortal or divine, could break. With Kratos and Bia goading him on, he bound Prometheus's limbs, securing him fast to the unfeeling stone. The final step was to drive a great wedge through the Titan's chest, pinning him irrevocably. As Hephaestus completed his terrible task, he could not meet Prometheus's gaze. He had imprisoned a champion of foresight and knowledge. The Titan remained silent, his defiance a palpable force against the howling wind. Once the enforcers were satisfied, they departed, leaving Prometheus utterly alone. He was a solitary figure against a vast, empty canvas of sky and mountain, a permanent monument to the price of rebellion. The physical restraints were set, but the true punishment, a torment of perfect cyclical design, had yet to begin. Dawn on the Caucasus was a cruel spectacle. For Prometheus, the rising sun did not bring warmth or hope, but the certainty of a recurring ordeal. The initial shock of his confinement had settled into a grim reality, an endless expanse of time stretching before him with no prospect of relief. His immortal nature, once a mark of his power, was now the very instrument of his suffering. Zeus had not intended for the chains alone to be the punishment. The true horror was a living, breathing extension of his wrath, the Caucasian eagle. This was no ordinary bird, but a monstrous creature, a divine beast sent with a singular, relentless purpose. Each morning, it would appear as a speck in the vast sky, growing larger with terrifying speed. Its arrival was announced by the beat of its giant wings, a sound that became synonymous with dread. The eagle would descend upon the helpless Titan and perform its dreadful task. It targeted his liver, which the ancients believed to be the seat of human emotions and passions. The choice was symbolic. Zeus was attacking the very core of Prometheus's being, the source of his rebellious compassion. Yet, the physical component was only one part of the ordeal. The true genius of the punishment lay in its cyclical nature. As an immortal, Prometheus could not perish. Each night, after the eagle departed, his body would slowly regenerate, his liver made whole once more. This miraculous healing was not a mercy, but a curse, ensuring that he was fully restored for the next day's torment. There was no escape, no end, only the endless repetition of the same dreadful event. In his isolation, he received visitors. The Oceanids, gentle nymphs of the sea, rose from the depths to offer their condolences. They wept for his fate and listened to his defiant speeches, but their sympathy was powerless. Their presence only served to underscore his complete helplessness against the might of Zeus. Prometheus endured, his will hardening with each passing day. The torment was designed to break him, to force him to regret his gift to humanity and beg for the mercy of the god he had defied. But the Titan's foresight had become an iron resolve. He would not yield. The sun would set, his body would mend, and he would face the dawn again, forever locked in a perfect, inescapable cycle of suffering and renewal. While the Titan suffered in silence upon his remote peak, the world he had sought to empower was irrevocably changing. The spark of fire he had delivered was fanning into a great blaze of civilization. For humanity, this was the dawn of the Promethean age. The gift was far more than simple warmth or protection from predators. Fire was the key that unlocked human potential. It was the heat that hardened clay into durable pottery, allowing for the storage of food and water. It was the forge that smelted ore into metal, first bronze and then iron, creating tools of unprecedented efficiency and strength. With these new tools, humans reshaped their world. They cleared forests for agriculture, built permanent settlements that grew into towns and cities, and constructed monuments to their own ingenuity. Knowledge, once passed down through fragile oral traditions, could now be advanced. The fire in the hearth became a central point for community, while the fire of the forge became the engine of progress. Arts flourished, sciences took their first tentative steps, and complex societies began to form. Humanity was no longer merely surviving the world, it was beginning to master it. But the stolen fire had a dual nature. It was a gift that also contained a curse. The same technology that allowed for the creation of the plowshare also allowed for the forging of the sword. With organized societies came organized conflict. The ambition that drove humans to build also drove them to conquer. Greed, power struggles, and warfare, once small-scale tribal skirmishes, now had the potential for far greater devastation. The gift had elevated humanity, bringing them closer to the level of the gods, but it also burdened them with divine flaws. On Olympus, the gods watched this grand experiment unfold with a mixture of detachment and apprehension. Under Zeus's decree, they were to interfere minimally, to let humanity chart its own course with the new power it possessed. They saw civilizations rise and fall, great works created and destroyed, and acts of profound kindness matched by acts of profound cruelty. Prometheus had wanted to free humanity from the whims of the gods, and he had succeeded. But in doing so, he had left them to the mercy of their own nature. The fire burned brightly in the cities of men, but it cast long and ominous shadows. The centuries turned into millennia. On Earth, the memory of Prometheus became a distant legend, a story told around fires he had made possible. But on Mount Olympus, the Titan was a present and persistent problem. Zeus ruled supreme, his power uncontested, yet he was haunted by a shadow of doubt, a secret that only his chained prisoner possessed. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, held knowledge of a dangerous prophecy. He knew that Zeus was fated to suffer the same destiny as his father, Cronus, to be overthrown by his own son. The prophecy was specific. A particular divine union would produce a male child whose power would surpass that of his father, the king of the gods. This secret was Prometheus's only weapon, his final act of defiance. Zeus, consumed by the same paranoia that had driven his father, desperately wanted this information. He could not simply destroy Prometheus, for the secret would be lost with him. He sent the messenger god, Hermes, to the Caucasus with offers of clemency and threats of even greater torments. Hermes, the eloquent diplomat, tried to reason with the Titan, urging him to relent and accept a place once more among the immortals. But Prometheus refused. The long years of his ordeal had not broken his spirit. They had forged it into something unbreakable. He would not trade his knowledge for an end to his own discomfort. He knew that his own liberation was also foretold, and that it was inextricably linked to the very prophecy Zeus feared. While this celestial drama played out, a new force was emerging in the mortal world. This was the age of heroes, a time when the boundaries between god and mortal blurred. The gods frequently descended to earth, and their unions with mortals produced a generation of demigods, men and women of extraordinary strength, courage, and destiny. These heroes, such as Perseus, Theseus, and Cadmus, undertook impossible quests, battled monsters, and founded dynasties. They were a bridge between the human and the divine, embodying the peak of mortal potential unlocked by the Promethean gift. Their rise signaled a fundamental shift in the cosmic order. No longer were humans merely the passive subjects of the gods. Through the heroes, humanity began to take an active role in the great mythological narrative. And among these heroes, one was destined for a path that would lead him to the desolate peaks of the Caucasus. Prometheus knew this. His liberator would not be a god, but a man, and, in the ultimate irony, a son of Zeus himself. The age of heroes found its ultimate expression in one man, Heracles, the son of Zeus, and the mortal Alcmene. His life was one of legendary trials, a series of 12 labors imposed upon him as penance, which served to prove his unmatched strength and fortitude. He battled mythical beasts and journeyed to the ends of the earth, his fame growing with each impossible task he completed. His travels eventually led him eastward to the formidable Caucasus Range, the very prison of Prometheus. His arrival at the Titan's Rock was not part of his mandated labors. It was a choice born of his own character, a testament to his heroic impulse to right wrongs and alleviate suffering wherever he found it. When Heracles saw the noble Titan chained to the cliff face, enduring his perpetual ordeal, he was moved not by fear of Zeus, but by compassion for the sufferer. He witnessed the arrival of the great eagle and understood the horrifying nature of the punishment. For Heracles, the embodiment of heroic action, there was only one possible response. As the eagle descended for its daily assault, the hero calmly drew his bow. With the peerless skill that had defeated the Stymphalian birds, he let fly a single arrow. The shaft flew true, striking the divine beast from the sky and ending the cycle of torment forever. The first part of the liberation was complete. Next, Heracles turned his attention to the chains themselves, the adamantine bonds forged by Hephaestus, which were said to be unbreakable. Summoning his legendary, God-given strength, Heracles shattered them. The sound of metal snapping echoed through the mountains, a declaration that the age of this particular punishment was over. Prometheus was free. After 30,000 years of confinement, the Titan stood unbound. In an act of profound gratitude, and recognizing that the prophecy had been fulfilled, Prometheus shared his long-held secret. He warned Zeus to avoid a union with the sea nymph Thetis, for it was she who was destined to bear a son greater than his father. Heeding the warning, Zeus arranged for Thetis to marry a mortal king, Peleus, and their son, Achilles, would become the greatest of mortal warriors, but no threat to Olympus. The cosmic crisis was averted. Prometheus was reconciled with Zeus and restored to his place among the gods. Heracles, his final and greatest deed complete, would eventually be granted immortality and ascend to Olympus himself. The Titan's ordeal was over, but for humanity, the fire he had given them continued to burn, a permanent legacy of progress and peril, a gift they now had to manage on their own. For uncounted centuries, the Titan Prometheus remained fixed to the desolate peaks of the Caucasus, his sentence a repeating cycle of torment. The world he had sought to enlighten had moved on, generations of mortals living and perishing with the gift of his fire, unaware of the price their benefactor paid. But myths are not static. They are rivers that flow towards resolution. And into this tableau of static suffering walked a new figure, a force of nature in human form, Heracles, the son of Zeus. His 12 labors, legendary trials of strength and courage, were nearly complete. His journey to the edge of the world was not a punishment, but another test, one that would pit him not against a simple beast, but against the very decree of his own father. As he ascended the jagged slopes, the air grew thin, the silence profound, broken only by the wind and the distant cry of a great bird. There, silhouetted against a cold sky, he saw him, the Titan, a figure of immense dignity even in his constrained state. And then, Heracles witnessed the daily horror. He saw the Atos Dios, the great eagle of Zeus, descend from the heavens. It was an instrument of divine retribution, relentless and cruel. The hero watched as the bird performed its grim task, a duty it had fulfilled for ages. In that moment, Heracles, a man known for his mighty passions and sometimes brutal strength, was moved by a profound sense of justice. This was not a righteous punishment. It was an endless ordeal. He drew his great bow, a weapon that had felled monsters and scattered armies. He nocked an arrow, its tip said to be dipped in the Hydra's potent essence. With the calm precision of a master archer, he took aim. The string sang, and the arrow flew, a streak of mortal defiance against a divine verdict. It found its mark with unerring accuracy. The great eagle, which had known no master but Zeus, faltered in its flight and fell from the sky, its reign of terror finally over. Prometheus, for the first time in an eternity, looked up to see not his tormentor, but a savior. The daily agony had ceased. A silence fell upon the mountain peak, heavier than any before it. An arrow had brought freedom from pain, but the Titan was not yet free. The chains, forged by a god, remained unbreakable. Heracles, the hero, had defied an edict, but could he undo it completely? The son of Zeus stood before the champion of humanity, and the fate of both now rested on the reaction of the king of the gods, watching from his throne on Olympus. The fall of Zeus's eagle was an act of rebellion that echoed all the way to Olympus. Yet, Zeus did not respond with thunderous rage. The king of the gods was a strategist, and he knew Prometheus held a piece of knowledge more valuable than any apology, a prophecy concerning his own downfall. The Titan knew the identity of the goddess whose future son was fated to become more powerful than his father, a child who could one day depose Zeus, just as Zeus had deposed his own father, Cronus. This secret was Prometheus's final, most powerful weapon. For his freedom, he would trade Zeus's future. An unspoken negotiation began across the cosmos, a bargain between two ancient adversaries. But freedom required more than just a deal. It required a sacrifice to balance the cosmic scales. The laws of fate dictated that an immortal could not be permanently freed from such a punishment unless another immortal willingly took his place in the realm of the dead. The solution came from an unexpected source. Chiron, the wisest of the centaurs. A noble teacher and healer, Chiron was immortal, but he lived in constant distress from a wound he had received accidentally from one of Heracles' own poisoned arrows. Because he could not perish, his condition was eternal. Hearing of the cosmic impasse, Chiron made a noble offer. He would renounce his immortality, allowing him to finally find peace from his long ailment and descend to the underworld. In doing so, he would fulfill the condition for Prometheus's release. Zeus accepted the terms. The prophecy would be his, Chiron would provide the sacrifice, and Heracles would be the agent of liberation. With the blessing of Olympus, the hero approached the Titan once more. He placed his powerful hands on the chains forged by Hephaestus, links of celestial metal meant to be unbreakable. With a surge of legendary strength, he shattered them. The sound of their breaking was the first note of a new era. Prometheus stood, stretching limbs that had not moved freely for millennia. He was unbound. Yet, Zeus decreed one final condition, a permanent reminder of his crime. Hephaestus was ordered to craft a ring from one of the broken links, setting into it a small piece of the very rock to which Prometheus had been bound. The Titan would wear this forever, a symbol that even in freedom, he was eternally bound to his punishment. Free, but marked, Prometheus descended the mountain, his mind reeling with the changes of a world he had not walked for over 30,000 years. Humanity had flourished with his fire, but what had they become? And what was his place among them now? Once freed, Prometheus the character was bound anew, this time in the pages of human history, art, and philosophy. His story became a foundational myth for Western civilization, a narrative endlessly reinterpreted to reflect the anxieties and aspirations of each new age. In his native Greece, the 5th-century Athenian playwright Aeschylus immortalized him in the tragedy Prometheus Bound. Here, the Titan is not a mere trickster, but a defiant political dissident, a champion of progress suffering under the heel of the tyrant Zeus. Aeschylus's Prometheus is a symbol of intellectual courage, enduring physical hardship for the sake of a principle, that knowledge and art belong to humanity, not to the gods. As the centuries passed, his image evolved. The Romans saw him through their own lens, and with the dawn of the Renaissance, he was reborn. For the humanists and thinkers of the Enlightenment, Prometheus personified the power of human reason to triumph over the darkness of superstition and ignorance. He was the ultimate scientist, the ultimate artist, whose stolen fire was the spark of genius and discovery that drove civilization forward. But it was during the Romantic period of the late 18th and early 19th centuries that the Titan truly found his voice in the modern world. The Romantics, with their emphasis on individualism, rebellion, and the power of the imagination, saw Prometheus as their quintessential hero. The poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, in his lyrical drama Prometheus Unbound, created the myth's most radical reinvention. Shelley's Titan is not merely freed by Heracles. He achieves his own liberation through an act of inner transformation. He renounces his hatred for his tormentor, Jupiter, and this act of forgiveness becomes the catalyst for a cosmic revolution, ushering in an age of universal love and freedom. At the same time, Shelley's wife, Mary, offered a darker interpretation. The full title of her groundbreaking 1818 novel is Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. Her protagonist, Victor Frankenstein, is a new kind of Titan. He doesn't steal fire from the gods, he creates life itself through science. But in abandoning his creation, he unleashes a catastrophe born of unchecked ambition and a lack of foresight. Mary Shelley's work shifted the myth's focus from rebellion against tyranny to the moral responsibility that comes with creative power. From heroic rebel to cautionary tale, the legacy of Prometheus was now inextricably linked to humanity's own growing power, setting the stage for the scientific dilemmas of the modern age. Mary Shelley's subtitle, The Modern Prometheus, was more than a literary device. It was a prophecy. The 19th and 20th centuries would see humanity steal new and more potent forms of fire from nature, with consequences that would dwarf the original myth. The Industrial Revolution was the first great flare-up. The fire of coal, powering steam engines and factories, was a gift that reshaped the globe. It built cities, connected continents, and created unprecedented wealth. But this new power came with a heavy price: polluted skies, grueling labor conditions, and a profound dislocation of society. Like Pandora's box, the gift of industrial fire released a host of new troubles upon the world. A century later, humanity would unlock a fire of truly cosmic proportions. In the deserts of New Mexico, a team of scientists, the new high priests of knowledge, worked in secret on the Manhattan Project. Their goal was to harness the fundamental power of the atom. Their leader, J. Robert Oppenheimer, was a brilliant, complex figure who perfectly embodied the Promethean dilemma. He was driven by intellectual curiosity and patriotic duty, a quest to grasp the ultimate secrets of the universe. When the first atomic device was tested in July 1945, Oppenheimer witnessed a man-made dawn, a fire brighter than 1,000 suns. The gift was delivered. But in that moment of triumph, he was not filled with elation. Instead, a line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, came to his mind. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." He understood immediately the terrible duality of his creation. This fire could power cities or annihilate them. It was the ultimate tool and the ultimate weapon. The atomic age had begun, and its creators were now burdened with a knowledge they could never forget. The Promethean parallel extends to every major technological leap since. The genetic code, the fire of life itself, can be edited and rewritten, offering cures for diseases, but also raising profound ethical questions about the nature of identity. The digital fire of the Internet has connected humanity in ways previously unimaginable, yet it has also created new arenas for conflict, misinformation, and control. The emerging flame of artificial intelligence promises to solve our greatest problems, but it also carries the risk of an intelligence beyond our command. Each new fire we steal from the gods of nature forces us to confront the same ancient questions. Do we understand what we have created? Are we prepared for the consequences? The modern Prometheus is not a single figure, but all of us, the scientists, the innovators, and the society that must learn to live with the awesome and terrifying power of the flames we now hold in our hands. The story of Prometheus is not a relic of a distant past. It is a living myth whose embers glow in the heart of our modern world. It is the story of humanity itself, a narrative of ambition, consequence, and the eternal struggle with the tools we create. From a single act of divine defiance on a mythical mountain, we have traced a legacy written in fire across millennia. We saw the Titan's punishment, a warning against hubris. We witnessed his liberation, a testament to heroism and sacrifice. We followed his spirit as it was captured by poets and philosophers, each shaping him into a mirror for their own time, a rebel, a savior, a symbol of reason, a cautionary tale. And we have seen his shadow fall across our own age, in the laboratories and server farms where new fires are stolen from nature every day. The myth endures because its central paradox is our own. The fire that Prometheus gave us is everything. It is the heat that warms our homes and cooks our food. It is the spark of inspiration that creates art and music. It is the engine of science that cures disease and carries us to the stars. It is the light of reason that pushes back against the darkness of ignorance. This fire is the very essence of civilization, the force that lifted our ancestors from the dust and set us on a path to shape our own destiny. Yet this same fire carries an inherent curse. The flame that forges a plowshare can also forge a sword. The knowledge that builds a city can also build a bomb. The technology that connects the world can also be used to divide it. For every gift of progress, Pandora's box seems to release an equivalent trouble. This is the eternal bargain. To be human is to be Promethean. It is to possess that restless, unquenchable drive to reach further, to know more, to challenge the limits of our existence. We cannot extinguish this inner fire without extinguishing what makes us who we are. The myth of Prometheus does not offer a simple answer. It offers a question, one that every generation must ask itself anew. As we stand in the light of our own powerful creations, from artificial intelligence to genetic engineering, we are forced to look at our hands and wonder, can we be masters of the flames we command, or are we destined to be consumed by them? The fire is undying. It was given to us long ago, and it is now ours to carry. It is our greatest gift, our most profound burden, and our ultimate test.